Dear listeners of Voice of Africa, gather close, for today we journey into the heart of Lagos, Nigeria, a city where dreams soar as high as its skyscrapers and secrets simmer beneath its vibrant pulse. In the opulent enclave of Victoria Island, where wealth glitters like stars and power is a currency fiercely guarded, lived a woman whose very presence was a command. Her name was Amora Oronquo, a figure of breathtaking elegance and unyielding strength. Tall and radiant, her light skin shimmered like polished ivory under the African sun, her cheekbones sharp as the cliffs of Obudu, carving stories of resilience into her face. Her eyes, deep and piercing, held a steely resolve that rarely softened into a smile, as if guarding a heart fortified by years of solitude. Amora was a woman who stopped time when she entered a room, not merely for her beauty but for the aura of untouchable grace she exuded, like an Igbo queen from ancient tales. Her wardrobe was a gallery of sartorial masterpieces, silk gowns from Milan's ateliers, tailored suits from Parisian runways, Ankara dresses hand-stitched with gold thread, each outfit a singular statement, never worn twice, a testament to her meticulous control. Her home, a sprawling white mansion, stood as a fortress of solitude amidst Victoria Island's clamor, its manicured gardens bursting with hibiscus, frangipani, and blood-red roses, guarded by stern security in starched uniforms, and sealed by a towering black gate that whispered strangers keep out. The elite of Lagos spoke of her in hushed, reverent tones, their whispers tinged with awe and envy. They called her heartless, a woman who lived for wealth alone, untouched by family, friends, or trust, her life a glittering cage of gold and silence. And in many ways, those whispers carried grains of truth. 3 years ago, her husband, Chief Dike Oronquo, a titan of industry whose charisma could light up Lagos, had passed away, leaving her childless and adrift in a sea of solitude. Her days were a relentless rhythm, commanding boardrooms in glass towers, jet-setting to global capitals, Dubai's shimmering malls, London's historic streets, New York's frenetic avenues, and returning to the echoing silence of her mansion. No laughter, no warmth, just the hum of air conditioners, the clink of crystal glasses against marble counters, and the weight of her own thoughts, heavy as the Lagos humidity. But dear listeners, destiny is a masterful storyteller, weaving threads of chance and fate into tapestries that change lives. Amora's carefully curated world, polished to perfection, was about to be appended by a single, rain-soaked afternoon that would rewrite her story in ways she could never have imagined. Picture this, a Thursday in Lagos, the sky bruised with thick, ominous grey clouds that smothered the sun like a heavy shroud, casting the city in a twilight gloom. Rain began as a shy patter, a gentle tease, then unleashed its fury, hammering the streets like the pounding of ancestral drums calling for a reckoning. Thunder rumbled in the distance, deep and foreboding, as if the heavens were warning of a seismic shift. Amora sat in the plush leather back seat of her sleek black Range Rover, its tinted windows shielding her from the chaos outside. Her driver, Keru, a wiry man with a quick smile and a knack for navigating Lagos's gridlock, wove through the snarl of traffic with practiced patience. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, catching hers. "Madam, this traffic is madness," he said, his pidgin laced with concern. "Should I take the Lekki shortcut? We might be stuck here till nightfall." Amora barely looked up from her phone, where a notification blinked with corporate urgency, meeting rescheduled to 5 p.m. "Please confirm." She sighed, the weight of another boardroom battle pressing on her shoulders like a leaden cloak. "Take Ozumbam Badu," she said coolly, her voice as sharp as the tailored blazer she wore. "I don't care if it takes 2 hours." "Yes, ma," Keru replied, turning the wheel with practiced ease, the car's engine purring like a contented leopard, slicing through the rain-soaked streets. Outside, Lagos was a symphony of survival in the storm. Rain lashed the windshield, wipers slashing back and forth like frantic warriors battling an unseen enemy. On the sidewalks, vendors shouted over the downpour, shielding roasted corn, puff-puff, and boli under tattered tarps, their voices rising above the din like a marketplace chorus. Pedestrians sprinted for cover under awnings and bus stops, some clutching colorful umbrellas that bobbed like flowers in the wind, others soaked to the bone, their vibrant Ankara fabrics clinging like second skins, revealing the resilience beneath. Horns blared in a cacophony of impatience, mingling with the revving of Okada motorbikes weaving dangerously through the gridlock and the distant wail of a street preacher promising salvation amidst the deluge. The air was thick with the scent of wet asphalt, damp earth, and the faint tang of suya spices lingering from roadside stalls, a sensory tapestry that defined Lagos in all its chaotic glory. The Range Rover crawled to a stop at a flickering red traffic light, its glow diffused by the relentless rain, casting an eerie halo on the road. Keru opened his mouth to grumble about the jam, his fingers tapping the steering wheel, when Amora's hand shot up, silencing him with the precision of a conductor halting an orchestra. "What's that?" she murmured, her voice low, eyes narrowing as she peered through the rain-streaked window, her breath fogging the glass. "What's what, Ma?" Keru asked, craning his neck to follow her gaze, his brow furrowed in confusion. There, on the narrow concrete divider splitting the road, stood a figure that seemed to belong to another world entirely. A world of hardship and survival that clashed with Amora's polished existence. A skinny boy, no older than 12 or 13, barefoot and trembling in the deluge, his tattered shirt plastered to his frail frame, soaked through to reveal the sharp angles of his collarbones. In his arms, he cradled 2 tiny babies, one in each, wrapped in flimsy plastic bags, discarded supermarket sacks, that offered scant protection from the rain's merciless assault. Their cries, faint but piercing, cut through the car's insulated glass like a knife, tugging at something deep within Amora's guarded heart, a primal instinct she hadn't known she possessed. Keru shook his head, his voice tinged with the cynicism of a city dweller who'd seen it all. "Madam, these street kids and their begging tricks. Some even rent babies to pull at heartstrings. Don't mind them, oh." But Amora wasn't listening. Her gaze was locked on the infants' faces, and a strange, inexplicable tightness gripped her chest, as if her heart recognized something her mind couldn't yet grasp. She leaned closer, her manicured fingers pressing against the window, as if drawn by an invisible thread that tethered her to this moment. "Those eyes," she whispered, almost to herself, her voice barely audible over the rain's roar, her breath catching in her throat. In that fleeting rain-blurred moment, one twin lifted her tiny face, revealing hazel eyes, rare, luminous, like polished amber catching the dim streetlight, glowing with a warmth that pierced the storm's gloom. Amora's heart stuttered, a flood of memories crashing over her like a tidal wave. It couldn't be. She blinked, blaming the rain, the flickering lights, or her exhausted mind playing cruel tricks, conjuring ghosts from her past. But then the second baby stirred, and those same haunting hazel eyes met hers, gleaming with an eerie familiarity that sent a jolt through her veins. Her pulse quickened, her breath shallow, as recognition surged, an echo of her late husband's gaze, those rare golden brown eyes she'd once fallen in love with, now staring back from the faces of 2 infants in a stranger's arms. "Stop the car," she commanded, her voice sharp with urgency, cutting through the hum of the heater and the patter of rain. Keru's eyes widened in disbelief, his hands tightening on the wheel. "Ma. I said, stop the car now." The brakes squealed as he pulled to the curb, the Range Rover lurching slightly on the slick road. Without a second thought, Amora flung open the door, stepping into the storm, her movements swift and resolute. Rain pelted her face, soaking her bespoke silk dress, drenching her perfectly styled hair, and turning her designer heels into muddy anchors. She moved with purpose, undeterred, her heart pounding with a force she couldn't name, a fire igniting within her. Keru scrambled after her, fumbling with a black umbrella, his voice rising in panic. "Madam, you'll catch a cold. Please, come back to the car. This rain no day play oh." She reached the boy, who looked up with wide, fearful eyes, clutching the babies tighter as if they were his only anchor in a world that had shown him little mercy. His thin frame shivered, his bare feet caked with mud, but his stance was defiant, a young warrior standing guard in a storm not of his making. "Who are you?" Amora demanded, her voice firm yet laced with an undercurrent of curiosity, rain streaming down her face, mingling with the resolve in her eyes. He hesitated, glancing at the infants before meeting her gaze, his voice trembling but steady. I'm Toby," he stammered, barely audible over the downpour. She crouched slightly, her eyes drawn irresistibly to the twins, their tiny faces pale and pinched, their bodies trembling in the cold. "And are they yours?" she asked, her tone sharp but not unkind. "Yes," he said, his grip unyielding, as if daring her to challenge his claim. "They are mine." Her brow arched, skepticism flickering in her eyes like a candle in the wind. "Your sisters." He paused, his shoulders tensing, then shook his head, his voice firm despite his youth. "No. My daughters." Amora recoiled, a whirlwind of emotions. Shock, anger, confusion, swirling within her, threatening to unravel her composure. "You're what?" 12. She asked, incredulous, rain dripping from her chin, her voice rising above the storm. 13, he corrected quickly, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet defiance. She shook her head, disbelief warring with the evidence before her. "And their mother? Where is she?" His gaze dropped, his voice breaking like fragile glass, raw with grief. "She died when they were born." The rain poured mercilessly, a relentless curtain that blurred the world around them. The babies shivered, one letting out a weak hoarse cry that pierced Amora's heart like an arrow, sharp and unyielding. Her lips parted, words failing her as the weight of his story settled, heavy as the sodden earth beneath her feet. The boy was clearly hiding something, perhaps everything, but the tenderness in how he cradled the twins, shielding them with his frail body, felt achingly genuine, a testament to a love that transcended his years. He hadn't begged for coins, hadn't extended a hand for pity, hadn't even moved from his spot on the divider. He simply stood there, a fragile sentinel in the storm, defying the world's cruelty with nothing but his will. Amora took a deep breath, her designer dress clinging to her skin, rain streaming into her eyes, and glanced back at her car, where the wipers fought a losing battle against the deluge, and Keru waited, his umbrella useless against the wind, his face etched with worry. "Bring them in," she ordered, her voice cutting through the rain like a blade, firm and unwavering. Keru blinked, stunned, his mouth opening in protest. "Ma." "I said, carry them into the car," she snapped, her tone leaving no room for argument. Snapping to action, Keru stepped forward, his shoes squelching in the mud, but Toby recoiled in terror, his eyes wild with fear, his voice rising in desperation. "Please don't take them." Amora raised a gentle hand, her gaze softening, rain mingling with the compassion breaking through her guarded exterior. "We're not taking them from you," she assured him, her voice steady, almost maternal, a tone she hadn't used in years. "You're coming with us." "I don't want to go to the police," he pleaded, his voice trembling like the baby's in his arms, his eyes searching hers for any hint of betrayal. "No police," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto his, a promise sealed in the storm. "I swear it." Toby hesitated, his eyes darting between Amora and the car, as if weighing the risk of trust against the certainty of the rain's cruelty. Then, slowly, he nodded, clutching the twins tighter as he followed her to the Range Rover, his bare feet leaving faint prints on the wet asphalt. Inside, the heater hummed to life, wrapping them in a cocoon of warmth that felt like salvation after the cold. Amora draped her luxurious cashmere scarf, soft as a whisper, and a silk shawl embroidered with gold thread over the babies, their cries fading into soft, exhausted whimpers, their tiny bodies relaxing in the unfamiliar comfort. Toby sat rigid on the leather seat, water dripping from his matted hair, his eyes darting around the opulent interior, gleaming dashboard, polished rosewood accents, the faint scent of Amora's jasmine perfume lingering in the air. He looked like a boy who'd wandered into a king's palace, half expecting to be cast out at any moment, his thin frame tense, his hands clutching the edge of the seat. Keru drove in tense silence, navigating the rain-slicked roads, the city's neon lights blurring into streaks of color, reds, blues, and greens reflecting off the wet pavement like a fractured rainbow. Amora's gaze remained fixed on the twins, their hazel eyes now closed, their tiny chests rising and falling rhythmically, a fragile rhythm of life. Questions churned in her mind like a gathering storm. Who was this boy? How had he survived such hardship? And those eyes, why did they echo Dykes so vividly, like a ghost reaching from the past to unravel her present? She didn't know what this impulsive act meant, but one truth was undeniable: this encounter was no accident. Destiny had steered her car to this moment, this boy, these babies, and Amora was determined to uncover its purpose, even if it meant dismantling the life she'd so carefully built. The Range Rover glided into her gated estate, the long, curving driveway flanked by swaying palm trees, their fronds dancing in the storm, and vibrant bougainvillea, their magenta petals glistening with rain. The towering black gate parted smoothly as the security guard, clad in a crisp navy uniform, recognized the vehicle, his salute sharp despite the downpour. Toby's jaw dropped, his eyes wide with awe as the mansion loomed into view, a white palace glowing under floodlights, its Grecian columns standing like silent sentinels, its walls adorned with intricate carvings of Igbo proverbs. "You live here?" he whispered, his voice barely audible, as if the grandeur were a dream he might wake from, his hands tightening around the twins. Amora remained silent, her mind a whirlwind of unanswered questions, her heart pounding with the weight of what she'd done. The car halted at the grand entrance, where uniformed staff rushed out with large black umbrellas, their movements precise despite the storm's chaos. One reached for the babies, his hands outstretched, but Amora pulled them close to her chest, her maternal instinct flaring. "Don't touch them," she snapped, her voice cutting through the rain like a blade, her eyes flashing with authority. The worker stepped back, puzzled, exchanging glances with his colleague, who hovered uncertainly. Carrying the infants herself, their tiny bodies light but heavy with meaning, she stepped inside, her heels echoing on the polished marble floor, the sound sharp against the soft patter of rain outside. Toby followed hesitantly, wiping his muddy feet on the pristine woven mat at the entrance, his movements careful, as if afraid to taint the perfection of this new world. The mansion's interior was a masterpiece of luxury, a symphony of warmth and elegance that enveloped them like a warm embrace. Golden lights cast a soft glow, reflecting off the marble floors like liquid sunlight, creating patterns that danced across the walls. The air carried the faint scent of lemon polish, mingling with the fragrance of fresh orchids arranged in crystal vases on mahogany tables, their petals delicate as whispers. A grand chandelier hung overhead, its crystals sparkling like a constellation trapped indoors, casting prisms of light that shimmered with every movement. Soft highlife music, Fela Kuti's soulful rhythms, Osita Osidibe's nostalgic melodies, drifted from hidden speakers, weaving a nostalgic tapestry that spoke of Nigeria's vibrant heart. Toby froze at the threshold, staring at his soaked, tattered clothes, his bare feet leaving faint smudges on the mat. "I'm dirty," he murmured, his voice small, eyes downcast, as if his presence were an offense to the opulence surrounding him. Amora paused, her gaze softening for a moment, a flicker of empathy breaking through her guarded exterior. She retrieved a plush white towel from a nearby rosewood cabinet, its surface inlaid with mother-of-pearl. "Step in. Wipe your feet," she said, her tone firm but not unkind. He complied swiftly, his movements careful, almost reverent, as if stepping into a sacred space. "Noi," she called, her voice echoing through the vast hall, resonant as a church bell. A housekeeper in a crisp green uniform hurried in, her braids neatly tucked under a cap, her eyes bright with efficiency. "Yes, madam." "Get a warm bowl of water and summon Dr. Martins immediately," Amora instructed, her voice steady but urgent. Noi nodded and vanished down the corridor, her footsteps muffled by the thick hand-woven carpet that stretched like a river of crimson and gold. Toby stood in silence, his gaze tracing the ornate ceilings painted with scenes of Igbo folklore, the intricate wall paintings of masquerades and palm trees, and the gilded staircase that spiraled upward like a promise of another world. This was a place he'd never imagined, a palace from storybooks he'd never read, a stark contrast to the muddy sheds and open skies he'd known. Amora gently laid the twins on a soft white couch in the expansive living room, its cushions plush as clouds, embroidered with delicate gold thread that caught the light. She used her cashmere scarf, soft as a whisper, to dry their delicate faces, their skin cold and clammy from the rain, their tiny bodies fragile as porcelain. One stirred, letting out a faint, plaintive cry that tugged at Amora's heart, a sound that echoed the loneliness she'd buried deep. Toby rushed over, concern etched on his young face, his eyes wide with worry. "Is she okay?" he asked, his voice trembling, his hands hovering protectively. "You know which is which?" Amora asked, intrigued by his attentiveness, a flicker of admiration breaking through her guarded exterior, her voice softening like the first rays of dawn. He nodded, pointing with a steady finger. "That's Chidimma. The other is Chisom." She repeated the names softly, Chidimma and Chisom, their Igbo melodies rolling off her tongue like a prayer. Chidimma, God is good, Chisom, God is with me, each syllable carrying the weight of heritage and hope. "You named them?" she asked, her voice quieter now, a note of curiosity mingling with respect. Yes, he replied, fidgeting nervously, his fingers twisting the hem of his borrowed shirt, his eyes darting to the floor as if ashamed of his own voice. Amora's eyes lingered on the twins, their hazel eyes stirring memories she wasn't ready to confront, like ripples spreading across a still lake. This impulsive act had shattered her carefully curated life, pulling her from the sterile world of boardrooms and balance sheets into something raw, something profoundly human. Those eyes, identical to Dyke's, glowing with that rare golden brown hue that had once captivated her, whispered of connections too profound to ignore, like a riddle carved in her heart, demanding to be solved. Minutes later, Dr. Martens arrived, a middle-aged man in a crisp white coat, his black medical bag gleaming under the chandelier's prismatic light, his demeanor calm yet purposeful. "Good evening, madam," he greeted with a slight bow, his voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "Doctor, thank you for coming so quickly," Amora said, standing with the grace of a queen, her posture impeccable despite the weight of the moment. "Please examine them, they've been exposed to the rain for too long." He knelt beside the twins, checking their temperatures and vital signs with gentle precision, his stethoscope glinting as he listened to their fragile heartbeats. Toby watched from the corner, silent and vigilant, his thin frame tense as if ready to leap to their defense, his eyes never leaving the doctor's hands. After 10 tense minutes, the doctor straightened, adjusting his glasses with a thoughtful frown. "They're hypothermic, with shallow breathing but no chest congestion yet," he said, his voice measured. "We need to warm them immediately and administer fluids. They're malnourished and very weak, likely from prolonged hunger." Amora's eyes narrowed, her voice steady but laced with urgency, her fingers tightening on the couch's edge. "Are they in danger?" "Stable for now, but they require rest, milk, and close monitoring to prevent complications," he replied, his tone professional but empathetic. "Do whatever is necessary," she instructed firmly, her tone leaving no room for doubt, her eyes flashing with a resolve that brooked no argument. As he set up tiny 4 drips, their delicate tubes glistening like lifelines, Amora turned to Toby, her gaze piercing, searching for truth in his young face. "Have they been eating?" He nodded hesitantly, his eyes flickering with shame, his voice barely above a whisper. "I try every day, but it's hard." "What do you feed them?" "Pap sometimes, soaked bread. Milk when I can afford it, but most days nothing," he admitted, his head bowed, his fingers twisting nervously. Her stare intensified, a mix of pity and disbelief tightening her chest, her manicured nails digging into her palms. "Where do you live?" He bowed his head further, his voice barely audible, heavy with the weight of his reality. "Behind the church, under a wooden shed." "Just you and the babies?" "Yes. Since they were born. Before that, a woman's kiosk, but she chased us out after Mommy died." Amora's chest constricted, a heavy stone settling there, her breath catching as the enormity of his words sank in. "Who was your mother?" she asked, her voice softening, though her eyes remained sharp. "Adesawa," he said softly, his voice carrying a quiet reverence. "She was a teacher." "And your father?" Toby faltered, his eyes darting away, his voice hesitant. "I don't know much. He visited sometimes, not often." Amora's breath hitched, a spark of suspicion igniting, her heart pounding with a question she feared to ask. "What did he look like?" "I was small," he said, his voice distant, as if reaching into a foggy memory. "I remember his eyes, like theirs." He pointed to the twins, and Amora's heart lurched, a torrent of emotions threatening to drown her. She turned away, her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window, the ghost of Dyke's hazel eyes haunting her thoughts like a specter from a life she thought she knew. That night, the twins were tucked into a guest room crib, a relic from storage dusted off and warmed by humming heaters, their tiny bodies swaddled in soft blankets embroidered with gold thread, their delicate patterns glinting in the soft light. Toby, bathed and dressed in borrowed clothes, an oversized cotton shirt and shorts from a gardener's son, the fabric clean but slightly frayed, devoured a plate of jollof rice, spicy egusi stew, and pounded yam with the hunger of days unfed, his spoon scraping the plate clean, his eyes wide with disbelief at the abundance. He collapsed on a nearby couch, arms curled protectively around himself, exhaustion claiming him like a long overdue debt. But sleep eluded Amora. She stood by her bedroom window, rain lashing the manicured garden below, the palm trees swaying like mourners in the storm, their fronds whispering secrets to the night. Her thoughts were consumed by Dyke, her late husband, whose memory now felt like a house built on lies, its foundations crumbling with each revelation. Their 10-year marriage had been a tapestry of love, shared dreams, and promises to grow old together, childless but content, or so she had believed. They had traveled the world, sipping champagne in Paris, dancing under the stars in Santorini, laughing over suya in Abuja's open-air markets. They had soothed the ache of infertility with assurances of us against the world, their bond a fortress against life's cruelties. But if these children were his, if Toby's story held truth, the betrayal cut deeper than his death, slicing through the trust she'd held sacred, leaving her to question every moment they'd shared. At midnight, unable to bear the uncertainty, she unearthed an old photo album, its leather cover worn from years of avoidance, its pages heavy with memories she'd locked away. She flipped through its images, each one a dagger: Dyke at their wedding, tall and charismatic, his hazel eyes gleaming with warmth as he smiled beside her, her white gown trailing like a dream across the lawn of their Ikoyi venue. Her hands trembled as she closed the album, tears burning behind her eyes, her breath shallow. "I need certainty," she whispered to the darkness, her voice a fragile thread. Dialing Dr. Martens, she spoke with a resolve that masked her fear, her heart pounding like a drum heralding war. "I need a DNA test, madam." His voice was thick with sleep, startled by the late hour. "Compare the babies to Dyke's autopsy sample. You have it on file from 3 years ago." "Understood. I'll start tomorrow," he said, his tone professional but tinged with concern. Are you okay?" She didn't answer, ending the call with a click, standing alone in the dark, the first step toward truth taken, her heart a battlefield of hope and dread. Morning dawned gray and heavy, the mansion cloaked in an expectant hush, as if the walls themselves awaited answers, their silence louder than the storm that had passed. Amora sat at the grand dining table, a masterpiece of mahogany and gold inlay, its surface gleaming under the chandelier's soft glow. Her plate of golden toast, perfectly poached eggs, and sliced mango sat untouched, a testament to her turmoil. Her fingers were tightly interlaced, her nails polished but bitten at the edges, her phone face down beside her, its silence a scream in itself. Questions swirled relentlessly, a storm within her mind. Who was this boy? How had he survived such hardship? And those eyes? Could it be mere coincidence, or was fate playing a cruel game, dangling her past before her? Footsteps approached, soft and tentative, barely audible over the hum of the air conditioner. Toby entered, cradling the twins, now cleaner and calmer, their tiny faces peaceful, their skin no longer clammy. One sucked her thumb, her hazel eyes half open, the other nestled against his shoulder, her tiny hand clutching his shirt like a lifeline. "Good morning, Ma," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of uncertainty, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. Amora gave a small nod, her eyes softening briefly, a flicker of warmth breaking through her guarded exterior. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a chair at the table's far end, its cushion upholstered in rich burgundy velvet. He perched cautiously, hesitating to touch the spread of bread, fruit, akara, and steaming tea until she urged, her voice firm but kind, "Eat. There's more in the kitchen, plantain, yam, anything you want." He placed the babies on a soft blanket beside his chair, carefully tucking it around them, and ate methodically, breaking the bread into small bits, feeding them water with a spoon, his movements deliberate, as if savoring each bite, as if expecting the food to vanish. Amora watched closely, noting the care in his actions, the way he glanced at the twins with a tenderness that belied his youth. "Are they always this calm?" she asked after a moment, her voice low, curious. He nodded, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "Yes, if I feed them and hold them close, they don't cry much." "They're 7 months old?" "Yes." She leaned forward, her gaze piercing, her voice steady but probing. "Toby, you're too young to be their father." He averted his eyes, his fingers pausing on the bread, his shoulders tensing. "Tell me the truth. Were they your mother's?" He nodded slowly, his voice barely audible, heavy with shame. "Yes. I'm their brother." "Why lie?" she pressed, her tone firm but not unkind, her eyes searching his face for answers. He looked down, shame flickering in his eyes like a candle in the wind. People don't help if you're just a brother. But when I say I'm their father, they listen. They give food, money, sometimes a place to sleep. Amora exhaled sharply, her lips pressing into a thin line, her heart caught between pity and frustration. I despise lies, she said, her voice low but cutting, her eyes narrowing. I'm sorry, he whispered, his head bowed, his voice trembling with regret. Silence settled between them, heavy as the humid Lagos air, thick with unspoken questions. Finish eating, she said finally, her tone softer, a gesture of truce. Dr. Martins will check the twins again soon. He nodded, not meeting her eyes, and resumed his meal with careful bites, his hands steady but his heart clearly racing. An hour later, Dr. Martins arrived, his white coat pristine, a small black case in hand, its leather worn but polished. He greeted Amora politely, his bow a nod to her authority, and moved to the guest room, where the twins lay in their crib, their tiny bodies surrounded by plush blankets. With gloved hands, he took swabs from their cheeks, sealing them in labeled containers with clinical precision, his movements swift and practiced. Amora stood by the door, arms crossed, her silk blouse catching the light, watching every move with the intensity of a hawk. Will it take long? She asked, her voice steady but laced with urgency, her fingers tightening on her arms. 2 days, maybe less, he replied, packing his case with care, his eyes meeting hers briefly. You're doing the right thing, madam. She didn't reply, only nodded, her thoughts a tangled knot of hope and fear. As he left, she knelt beside the crib, the twins gazing up with those haunting hazel eyes, now bright in the morning light, their golden brown hue a mirror to Dykes. Who are you? She whispered, her fingers grazing the crib's carved edge, as if it held the answer she sought, her voice a fragile thread in the quiet room. That evening, Amora ventured into Dykes' untouched study, a time capsule locked since his death 3 years ago, its door a barrier she'd avoided crossing. The room smelled of dust, old books, and the faint trace of his cologne, sandalwood and citrus, a scent that once comforted her but now felt like a betrayal, sharp and stinging. She hesitated at the door, her hand trembling on the brass knob, her breath shallow. Stepping inside, she felt like an intruder in her own home, the air heavy with memories. The desk was as he'd left it, books neatly stacked, a fountain pen resting on a half-finished crossword, a photo of them in Paris framed in silver, her smile radiant beside his. She rifled through drawers, bank statements, receipts, a faded business card from a long-forgotten deal, until she found a small wooden box, its carvings of Igbo motifs worn smooth by time. Her heart pounded as she opened it, revealing letters, not in her handwriting, their paper yellowed but carefully preserved. Her breath caught as she unfolded one. Dyke, thank you for last weekend. Toby was thrilled to see you, playing with the toy car you brought. I wish you could stay longer. I understand your life is complicated, but I want you to know I don't expect anything. Just come when you can. Love, Adesawa. Another, it's ink smudged by time. Toby asks about you daily. I tell him you're saving the world, building empires. I don't want him to hate you, but Dyke, sometimes I wish you'd tell her. Tell your wife the truth. Amora's hands shook, her breath shallow, the words a knife slicing through the illusion of her marriage, each sentence a wound that bled betrayal. She closed the box, her chest tight with fury and grief, and fled the room, locking the door behind her, as if she could seal away the pain, the room's silence louder than her racing heart. The next morning, Amora descended the grand staircase, her heels clicking softly on the marble, and saw Toby on a woven rug in the living room, the twins giggling as he dangled a scarf tied into a makeshift toy, its vibrant colors swaying like a market banner. Their laughter, bright and unburdened, filled the mansion with a warmth it hadn't known in years, a melody that softened its cold edges, like sunlight breaking through a storm. She paused, watching from above, her heart caught between awe and ache, a quiet longing stirring within her. Good morning, Ma, Toby said, noticing her, his voice soft but steady, a small smile breaking through his uncertainty. She nodded, descending slowly, her silk dress flowing like a river of emerald. They're better today, he said, his smile widening, his eyes bright with hope. No fever. They slept well. That's good, she replied, her voice quieter than usual, her gaze lingering on the twins, their chubby cheeks flushed with health. He hesitated, then asked, his voice tentative, "Ma, can I ask you something?" She raised an eyebrow, intrigued, her heart softening at his vulnerability. "Go ahead. Are you going to send us away?" The question hung in the air, raw and vulnerable, a plea wrapped in courage. Amora took a deep breath, her gaze steady, her voice measured. "I don't know yet." His face fell slightly, a shadow crossing his young features. "You want to stay?" she asked, her tone softer, probing. He nodded, his eyes earnest, glistening with unspoken hope. "We'll see," she said, her voice neutral but her heart stirring, a silent promise forming in the space between them. The moment lingered, heavy with possibility, a bridge between their worlds beginning to form. The DNA results arrived the following day, delivered by Dr. Martens in a sealed brown envelope, its edges crisp, Amora's name written in neat script across the front. Alone in her office, a sleek space of glass and steel overlooking the Lagos skyline, its towers glinting like spears in the sun, she stared at the envelope, her hands cold, her pulse racing like a drumbeat. She tore it open, her eyes scanning the first line, DNA match confirmed. Probability of paternity 99.98%. Her world shattered like glass, fragments of her past scattering across the floor of her mind. "They are his," she whispered, pacing frantically, the paper trembling in her hands, her breath shallow. The twins were Dyke's daughters. Toby was his son. A secret family, hidden through years of hospital visits, failed IVF treatments, tear-soaked nights, and whispered assurances that it's not your fault. Tears rolled down her cheeks, unchecked, as betrayal and grief collided, a storm within her heart. She remembered the nights she cried herself to sleep, blaming her body for its emptiness, while Dyke held her, promising they were a team, their love a fortress against the world. He had lied, built a life parallel to hers, a family she never knew, and left her to face the wreckage alone, his death sealing the secret until this moment. That night, she sat with Toby on the living room couch, the twins asleep in their crib nearby, their soft breaths a quiet rhythm against the hum of the air conditioner. The room was bathed in golden light, the chandelier casting prisms that danced on the walls like fireflies. She didn't speak at first, nor did he, the silence heavy with unspoken truths. Then she turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "Toby," she said, "did you ever meet your father?" He nodded slowly, his eyes distant, as if peering into a memory clouded by time. "He brought presents, sweets, toys, a red car once. He never stayed long. Mommy said he had another life, somewhere big." "Did he tell you his name?" "Yes," he said, his voice quiet. "He said he was Mr. Dyke." Amora closed her eyes briefly, the confirmation a fresh wound, slicing deeper than she'd expected. "Do you have any pictures?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her effort to stay composed. Toby reached into a small plastic bag, its edges frayed from use, and pulled out a folded, faded photo. Amora took it with shaky fingers, her breath catching. There was Dyke, standing beside a smiling woman, Adesawa presumably, her arm around a younger Toby, his face bright with a child's joy. The sight was a punch to her gut, a visual confirmation of the life he'd hidden. She looked away, handing the photo back, her hands trembling, and walked to the window, where the sky was now clear, stars piercing the darkness like diamonds. Inside her, a storm raged, its winds howling with betrayal, grief, and a strange, unexpected flicker of hope. Sleep eluded Amora again. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing like a car without brakes, careening through memories and questions. The DNA test was real, undeniable, a scientific truth that shattered the illusion of her marriage. The twins were Dyke's daughters, Toby his son. Her husband, the man who vowed they were in everything together, had built a secret life under her nose, a parallel family that mocked the tears she'd shed over their childless years. The betrayal stung, sharp and unrelenting, but so did the shame, of believing she was the reason they couldn't have children, of trusting his every word, his every touch. By morning, she resolved to dig deeper, to uncover the woman who had shared Dyke's heart, to understand the life he'd hidden. She called Mr. Follerin, a private investigator whose discretion she'd trusted during a past board dispute, his reputation as sharp and quiet as a shadow. I want everything about a woman named Adesawa from Ayaganku, she said, her voice steady, though her heart trembled. She had a son named Toby and died 2 years ago in childbirth. Where she lived, worked, who knew her, everything. Falarin didn't ask questions, his voice calm and professional. You'll hear from me before the day ends, madam. That morning, Amora stood at the grand staircase, her silk robe flowing like a river of sapphire, watching Toby read a storybook to the twins, his voice soft as he narrated tales of Anansi the spider, his hands animated as he mimicked the trickster's antics. Their giggles were a melody that softened the mansion's cold edges, a warmth that seeped into the cracks of Amora's guarded heart. She didn't know what she felt, pity, anger, guilt, but it was deeper than words, a stirring that felt like the first notes of a song she'd forgotten how to sing. By afternoon, Falarin called back, his voice steady as he delivered his findings. Her full name was Adesawa Yume, he said. Taught at St. Luke's primary school in Ayaganku. Respected, quiet, never married. Lived in a one-room apartment behind the school, simple but neat. Had one regular visitor. A man from Lagos in a big car, described as tall, well-dressed. Neighbors said she never named him, only called him a friend. She died in a small clinic during a complicated delivery of twins 2 years ago. Amora gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles paling, her breath shallow. What about the boy, Toby? He stayed with a neighbor briefly, then vanished. Refused the orphanage, said he'd care for his sisters himself. Neighbors said he was stubborn but kind, always protecting the babies. Amora closed her eyes, picturing a boy, barely 12, standing in the rain with newborns, no one to help, his small frame defying the world's indifference. Did she ever try to contact me? She whispered, her voice barely audible. No record of that, madam, Falarin replied. But a letter from her belongings, kept by a neighbor, said, Tell your wife the truth, Dyke. It's time. Amora swallowed hard, her throat tight. Send everything to my email, she said, ending the call and sitting on the edge of her bed, the weight of Adesawa's life pressing against her own, a mirror reflecting a truth she wasn't ready to face. In the garden that evening, under a canopy of stars that glittered like Lagos's city lights, Amora found Toby rocking Chisom to sleep, her tiny head resting on his shoulder, Chidimma chewing a plastic toy shaped like a star, its edges worn from use. The air was cool, scented with jasmine and the faint earthiness of wet soil. Can we talk? Amora said, sitting on a wrought iron bench, its cushions soft as velvet. He stood quickly, his eyes wide with respect. Yes, ma. She patted the space beside her, her gesture gentle. I found out about your mother today, she said, her voice steady but warm. She was a good woman, a teacher, quiet, honest. She raised you with little and never tried to break my marriage. Toby looked down, his voice soft, his fingers tracing the toy in Chidimma's hand. She said we had a big family somewhere, that the truth would come to us when we were ready. It has, Amora said, her eyes steady, meeting his with a quiet intensity. He looked at her, his voice tentative. You're my stepmom. She paused, surprised by the word, its weight settling like a stone in her chest. Yes, I guess I am, she said, her voice softer now, a smile tugging at her lips. He looked at the grass, tears brimming in his eyes, reflecting the starlight. I'm sorry, he whispered. For what? For everything, he said, his voice breaking. She frowned, her heart aching. You didn't do anything wrong, Toby. He looked up, his eyes glistening, raw with emotion. You're crying. She wiped her cheek quickly, her fingers trembling. I'm not, she said, but her voice betrayed her, a crack in her armor. He smiled faintly, a flicker of hope in his young face. I just wanted to keep them safe, he said, his voice quiet but fierce. I begged, washed cars, slept in churches, under bridges, anything to feed them. I know, she said, her throat tightening, her hand resting gently on Chisom's back, feeling the warmth of her tiny body. You're brave, Toby. No, he shook his head, his voice raw. I was scared every night, but I couldn't let them suffer. Amora's eyes softened, her voice a vow. You won't suffer anymore. Later, in front of her bedroom mirror, Amora studied her reflection, the woman staring back a stranger. The cold queen, polished and proud, had cracked, revealing a heart that yearned for more than wealth, more than power. She remembered praying for children, nights spent kneeling in her private chapel, her tears staining the marble floor, blaming herself for an emptiness she couldn't fill. She had considered adoption once, but Dyke had dismissed it. No child we didn't make will feel like ours. Now, a boy and 2 babies, not hers by blood, felt like destiny's gift, a second chance she hadn't dared to dream. The next morning, she found Toby changing the twins' clothes in the guest room, his fingers nimble as he buttoned Chidimma's tiny shirt, its fabric soft and patterned with stars. "You're always up early," she said, leaning against the doorframe, her silk robe catching the morning light. "I don't sleep much," he admitted, his eyes focused on his task. "I can tell," she said, sitting on the bed, watching him with a quiet curiosity. "Toby, how would you feel if I ensured you never had to sleep under the rain again?" He looked up, confused, his hands pausing. "You mean, stay here forever?" "Not just stay," she said, her voice steady, her eyes warm. "Live here. Go to school. Be safe. Let them grow here too." His eyes widened, then filled with tears, his small frame trembling. He burst into sobs, collapsing to his knees, his hands covering his face as if the weight of hope was too much to bear. Amora didn't move for a moment, stunned by the rawness of his emotion, then knelt beside him, pulling him close, her arms a sanctuary. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered, her voice a vow, her heart cracking open to let him in. "I promise." The news didn't stay quiet. In a mansion like Amora's, walls whispered, and whispers traveled faster than the Lagos breeze. By morning, Victoria Island buzzed, the gossip spreading like wildfire through Banana Island's elite circles and the bustling markets of Balagan. She brought in a street boy. The twins are Dykes. Did he cheat all those years? The rumors rolled and twisted, a storm of speculation that reached the ears of those who mattered most. Not out of care, but out of fear that Amora was about to shift the balance of power in the Oronquo Empire. On Sunday afternoon, 3 black SUVs rolled into her compound like a royal entourage, their tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Her head of security, a burly man named Kalechi, called her immediately. "Madam, it's Chief Emma Oronquo with 2 of his cousins." Amora stood from her reading chair in her private lounge, a serene space of cream cushions and mahogany bookshelves, and placed her cup of chamomile tea on the table, its steam curling like a question mark. "Let them in," she said simply, her voice calm but edged with steel. Downstairs, the front door opened, revealing Chief Emma, Dyke's elder brother, a bulky man with a sharp voice and a habit of speaking as if the world owed him homage. He walked in with his chest out, his agbada flowing like a king's robe, followed by 2 younger men in tailored abadas, their dark sunglasses a futile attempt at intimidation indoors. Amora didn't stand when they entered the living room, her posture regal as she sat on a velvet armchair, her legs crossed, her silk gown catching the light. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice cool, her eyes assessing them like a chess master studying the board. Emma didn't smile, his jaw tight. "We need to talk." "I assumed that's why you're here," she replied, her tone even, a faint smile playing on her lips. The youngest cousin hissed, his voice dripping with disdain. "So, it's true." Amora's gaze shifted to him, unflinching. "What exactly is true?" Emma paced slowly, his heavy steps echoing on the marble, as if claiming the space. "You brought a boy into this house. A boy with 2 babies. Babies that people are saying belong to Dyke." Amora said nothing, her silence a challenge. Emma's eyes narrowed, his voice sharp. "Is it true?" She reached for a file on the glass table beside her, its edges crisp, and slid it toward him with deliberate calm. "Read for yourself." He picked it up, opened the first page, and read the DNA report, his face unchanging but his fingers tightening on the paper, creasing its edges. "Where did you find them?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "In the rain, begging for food," she said, her voice steady, her eyes locked on his. He slammed the file shut, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "And you brought them into this house? Just like that?" "They are Dyke's children," she said, her voice rising slightly, firm as granite. He pointed at her, his finger trembling with anger. "That doesn't mean they're yours." Amora stood, her movement fluid, her presence commanding. They carry the same blood that ran through his veins. That means they carry part of mine too. The other cousin stepped forward, his voice measured but sharp. Madam Amora, with all due respect, we understand you're hurting, but this is a serious matter. I know exactly how serious it is, she said, her voice low, a warning. Emma dropped into a chair, his bulk sinking heavily. Do you know what people are saying? That you've lost your mind. That you want to hand over everything to strangers. They are not strangers, Amora snapped, her eyes flashing. They are his children. The ones he hid from me. The ones none of you cared to find after his death. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Emma leaned forward, his voice a growl. You're about to destroy everything. The board is asking questions. The shareholders are restless. Bringing in children from nowhere, that's not how things are done in our family. Amora folded her arms, her posture unyielding. What you mean is you were planning to take everything. He didn't deny it, his eyes cold. You have no children, he said plainly. No heir. That means the family takes over. It's how things are done. Not anymore, she replied, her voice a quiet storm. The youngest cousin raised his voice, his tone bitter. So, you want to name the boy as heir? A street boy. Toby is not just some street boy, she said firmly, her voice cutting through the room. He's Dyke's son, which makes him more of an heir than any of you. The cousin laughed, a bitter sound. He doesn't even know how to hold a spoon properly. He'll learn, she said, her eyes narrowing. You're making a mistake, he warned. Amora took a step closer, her presence towering despite her slender frame. I made one before. I trusted Dyke. I let him lead while I played the quiet wife. Not anymore. Emma stood, his bulk looming. We'll fight this, in court, in the press, wherever we have to. Amora's voice dropped, cold as ice. Go ahead, but you'll lose. Because unlike you, I have the truth. He pointed at her one last time, his voice a growl. You'll regret this. She raised her chin, her eyes blazing. No, you'll regret underestimating me. After they left, Amora sat back down, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from fury, the audacity of their intrusion burning in her veins. She heard small footsteps and turned. Toby stood at the hallway entrance, his face tight, his hands clenched, having heard every word. I can go if you want, he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Amora stood slowly, her gaze softening. Go where? Anywhere, he shrugged, his eyes downcast. I don't want to cause trouble. She walked to him, placing both hands on his shoulders, her touch firm but gentle. You're not going anywhere, she said, her voice a vow. They're angry, he said, his eyes meeting hers, fear flickering within them. They've always been angry, she replied. They were angry when I married Dyke. They were angry when I took over the company. Now they're angry because you exist. He looked into her eyes, his voice small but resolute. I'm not trying to take anything from them. I know, she said, her voice softening. I just want them, he glanced down the hallway where the twins slept, to have a chance. Amora nodded, her heart swelling. And they will. That evening, the house was tense, the staff moving in hushed steps, their whispers barely audible. Amora didn't care. She called her lawyer, Barrister Ayatund, a sharp-witted woman with a reputation for winning impossible cases. Draw up the paperwork, Amora said, her voice steady over the phone. For what? Ayatund asked, her tone cautious. I want guardianship over the children. And I want Toby enrolled in the best school by next week, uniforms, books, everything. Are you sure, Ma? This will trigger war. Amora's voice was resolute. I'm not starting a war. I'm finishing it. The next day, the press came knocking, their cameras flashing like vultures circling. A headline screamed across Lagos, widow of late Chief Dyke Oronquo takes in street children, claims they are his secret heirs. Photographers camped near the mansion's gates, their lenses glinting in the sun. Reporters shouted questions as Amora's car drove out, their voices a chorus of curiosity and judgment. Her board members called, their tones ranging from concern to veiled threats. One, Mr. Raji, a silver-haired tycoon, finally voiced what others whispered. Madam, this will affect the company. Investors are nervous. The media won't let it go. Maybe it's best you take a break. Amora's lips curved into a cold smile. A break from my own company? Just for a while, until this storm passes, he urged. She ended the call without another word, her resolve unshaken. By the following week, she held a press conference in a small, elegant hall, its white curtains billowing softly, its air scented with lavender. She walked in wearing a plain black gown, no earrings, no makeup, just truth raw and unadorned. She sat at a table before flashing cameras, her posture regal, her voice steady as she began. My name is Amora Oronquo. I am the widow of the late Chief Dyke Oronquo, a man I loved deeply and who I recently discovered had a second family outside our marriage. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, a wave of shock. She raised a hand for silence, her eyes scanning the room. I discovered this not through rumors, but through fact. I found his son begging in the rain, holding his twin sisters, their faces pale, their bodies weak. I ran a DNA test. She held up the file, its pages stark against the table. The results were clear. These children are his. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like dust. I know this shocks you, she continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. It shocked me too. But truth doesn't care about feelings. It just is. She paused, her eyes softening, her voice growing firmer. Some believe I should hide them, erase them, pretend they don't exist. I won't. These children carry my husband's blood, whether I like it or not. And unlike others, they never asked to be born in secret. They never lied. They simply existed. A reporter raised a hand, his voice sharp. Madam, are you adopting them? I'm doing more, she said, her voice resolute. I'm raising them. I'm giving them my name, and I will protect them, from family, from courts, from people like you who think being born on the street makes you less human. Another asked, what about the company? She smiled, a glint of defiance in her eyes. I built half of it. I will not be pushed aside. The children are not here for your money. They are here because they deserve to live. A third reporter, bolder, asked, what if Chief Emma fights you? Her smile sharpened. Then he'll learn what it feels like to lose. 3 days after the press conference, chaos erupted. Her phone rang incessantly, investors pretending concern, board members warning of ruin, one shouting, another begging, one even offering a bribe to handle the matter privately. Amora listened, her face impassive, but her decision was ironclad. Toby and the twins were her family now, a truth she'd carved in her heart. One morning, she stood in the twins' room, watching them sleep, their chubby hands resting on their tiny bellies, their breathing slow and sweet, a rhythm of life that softened her edges. She smiled gently, a rare warmth breaking through. Toby entered, dressed in his new school uniform, a crisp white shirt tucked into navy blue trousers, socks pulled high, shiny black shoes gleaming. He carried a school bag, its straps slightly too big for his frame. You look sharp, Amora said, her smile widening. He blushed, his eyes shy. Thank you, Ma. You ready? He nodded, his voice steady. Yes. She bent and adjusted his collar, her fingers gentle. You'll do well. He looked down, his voice small. What if the other students laugh at me? She paused, her eyes meeting his. Then you hold your head high. You face things no boy your age has, begging in the rain, caring for babies, surviving. You're stronger than them. He looked up slowly, his eyes glistening. So, I'm not just some boy? Her voice became firm, a vow. You are not just anything. You are strong. You are smart. You belong. He smiled, his eyes bright with hope. She reached into her purse and handed him a small leather notebook, its cover embossed with his initials. What's this? He asked. Your dreams, she said. Write them in there. One day, you'll read it again and see how far you've come. He hugged her tightly, his voice a whisper. Thank you, Auntie Amora. She smiled, her heart swelling, and whispered back, You can call me Mom if you want to. He pulled back, eyes wide. Really? She nodded, her smile warm. He whispered, Okay, Mom, and hugged her again, his small frame trembling with emotion. Later that day, Amora sat in her office, a sleek space of glass and steel, reviewing company documents, her pen poised over a contract. Barrister Ayatund entered, a stack of papers in hand, her glasses perched on her nose. Everything's ready, she said. You just need to sign. Amora took the documents, her eyes scanning them carefully. The first gave her full legal guardianship over Toby, Chisom, and Chidimma. The second updated her will, naming the children as her legal beneficiaries. She picked up her pen, pausing, her hand steady but her heart racing. Once I do this, she said slowly, there's no turning back. Ayatund nodded, her voice calm. Yes, Ma. Amora signed, each stroke deliberate, sealing her decision with the weight of ink and resolve. Meanwhile, trouble brewed outside her gates. Chief Emma had not taken her press conference lightly. He filed a lawsuit, claiming Amora was unfit to care for children due to emotional instability and grief-driven behavior, alleging she was making irrational choices that could damage the Oronquo family name. He also moved to freeze the family estate and remove her from the board. Ayatund informed her immediately, her voice urgent over the phone. Ma, they're going full force. Amora didn't flinch, her voice cold. Then so will we. That night, she walked into the twins' room, where the nurse was giving Chidimma a bath, the scent of baby soap filling the air. Toby was nearby, folding tiny clothes, humming a soft tune, a Yoruba lullaby his mother once sang. He looked up, his eyes bright. You're back. She nodded, walking over. I signed the papers today. His face turned curious. What papers? You're mine now, she said softly, her voice warm. All of you. He froze, his eyes wide. You mean, you adopted us? She smiled, her heart full. Yes. He ran into her arms, his embrace tight, not crying but holding on as if anchoring himself to this new reality. You're not going back to the street, she whispered. Ever again. The next morning, the storm broke. Amora's name was splashed across headlines, court battle over billions, Dyke's widow and secret children caught in legal fire. Some called her foolish, others brave, many unsure what to think. The courtroom was packed on the first day of the hearing, a grand space of dark wood and high ceilings, its air heavy with anticipation. Amora entered in a dark blue suit, her heels clicking on the floor, her head held high like a warrior queen. Barrister Ayatund followed, calm and sharp, her briefcase brimming with evidence. Across the room sat Chief Emma and his lawyers, their faces stern, their eyes calculating. The judge entered, a stern woman with silver hair, and the courtroom rose. When it was time to speak, Emma's lawyer stood, his voice booming. My lord, we are here to protect the legacy of the late Chief Dyke Oronquo. The woman before you is grieving, yes, but also unstable. She has taken in unknown children based on rumors and is trying to hand over everything our client built to strangers. He turned to the judge, his tone grave. We ask that her control over the estate be suspended and the children removed from her custody until their identity is confirmed. The judge nodded slowly, her eyes sharp, and turned to Amora's side. Response. Ayatund stood, holding up the DNA report, its pages stark against the courtroom's dim light. My lord, there is no rumor here. There is fact, scientific proof that these children are the biological offspring of the late Chief Dyke Oronquo. That alone gives them a rightful place in this family. She placed the papers on the table, her voice steady. But more than blood, we must ask, what is family? Is it just a name, or is it love, sacrifice and truth? Because if it is the latter, then Madame Amora is already their mother in every way that counts. The room was silent, the weight of her words settling like a verdict. The judge looked from one side to the other, her expression unreadable. I will review the documents and give my ruling in 3 days. Court dismissed. Outside, the media swarmed, their cameras flashing like a storm of fireflies. Madam Amora, are the children really dykes? Why are you doing this? Is this about revenge? She ignored them, her face calm, and entered her car, the tinted windows shielding her from their scrutiny. Her heart raced, but her resolve was unshaken. She had shown the world the truth, and now she waited to see if the world cared. Back at the mansion, Toby met her at the door, his eyes wide with worry. How did it go? She forced a smile, her voice steady. We'll know soon. He looked worried, his hands twisting nervously. If they take us away. They won't, she said firmly, her hands on his shoulders. No one is taking you. You hear me? He nodded, but the fear in his eyes broke her more than any courtroom could. 3 days later, the ruling came. The judge's voice was clear, resonant in the packed courtroom. After reviewing the submitted evidence, including DNA results, statements of care, and witness reports, the court sees no reason to remove Madam Amora Oronquo from her legal guardianship over the minors in question. Her actions, while untraditional, have been found to be in the best interest of the children. Amora's breath caught, relief flooding her. The judge continued, furthermore, the estate remains under her control, and the board shall respect the late chief's family rights as they now stand. Case closed. Emma's lawyer stood, his face red with anger. We will appeal. The judge's voice was calm but firm. You are free to try, but the court has spoken. Amora stood quietly, her face composed, and turned to Emma, her voice low. Now what? He scowled, his eyes burning. You think this is over? She smiled, a glint of triumph in her eyes. No, but it's my turn to win. Outside, reporters flooded her again, their questions a barrage. She stopped this time, her voice clear. I didn't fight for power, she said. I fought for 3 children who were forgotten. One of them saved their lives. Now I will spend the rest of mine saving his. She walked past the cameras, her head high, her heart steady. That night, she came home to find Toby waiting, his face anxious but hopeful. You heard? She asked. He nodded, his voice soft. You won. She sat beside him, her voice gentle. No, Toby. We won. The court battle was over, but the damage lingered, a quiet tension in the air. The next morning, Amora sat alone in her room, sipping chamomile tea, the sunlight slipping through silk curtains. It should have been a beautiful day. She had won, protected Dyke's children, kept Toby and the twins safe. But her heart was heavy, a weight she couldn't name. She had fought family, board and court, but one battle remained, facing herself. She stood and walked to the mirror, her reflection showing a woman older, tired, her eyes carrying the scars of betrayal. She remembered the Amora of years ago, the woman who laughed easily, who wore soft pink lip gloss and danced barefoot with Dyke in their living room after dinner, who believed in forever. That Amora was gone, buried under years of grief and lies. She needed to say goodbye to her, to embrace the woman she was becoming. Downstairs, Toby sat on the living room rug, building a small house with colorful blocks, the twins giggling as Chidimma knocked it down, her laughter bright as bells. Chisom clapped her tiny hands, her hazel eyes sparkling. Amora watched from the stairs, her heart swelling. Toby had changed, his hair neater, his eyes brighter, his frame taller. But more than that, he walked with confidence, no longer expecting to be cast out. He looked up and saw her, waving with a shy smile. She joined them on the rug, Chisom crawling into her lap, Chidimma touching her gold earrings with chubby fingers. Toby reached for her hand, his voice soft. Can I ask you something? Anything, she said, her voice warm. Did you love him? My dad. She paused, her heart tightening. Yes, she said finally. I loved him deeply. He waited, his eyes searching. Did he love you? I think he did, in his own way, she said, her voice steady but tinged with pain. But he also hurt me. Toby lowered his eyes, his voice small. I'm sorry. You don't need to be, she said, cupping his chin gently. You didn't ask to be born, or to be hidden. That was his choice, not yours. I just wish I met you earlier, he whispered. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. Me too. Later that evening, Toby helped a housekeeper in the garden, trimming hibiscus bushes and pulling dry leaves, humming a Yoruba lullaby. Amora stood on the balcony, watching, her silk scarf fluttering in the breeze. She noticed a quietness in him, a weight he carried despite his smiles. After dinner, she called him into her office, a cozy space lined with books and a mahogany desk. Toby, she said, gesturing to a chair, tell me what's really going on in your heart. He sat, hugging a throw pillow, his eyes confused. What do you mean? You've been quiet since the court ruling, she said. Happy but quiet. He shrugged, his voice small. I don't know how to be here sometimes. Everyone is kind, but I feel like I don't know the rules, how to sit, eat, talk in front of rich people, use a napkin, not say yes ma too much. Amora smiled, a warmth spreading through her. You don't need to change who you are. But I don't want to embarrass you, he said, his eyes honest. You haven't, she said, her voice firm. He looked up, his voice raw. At school, they ask where I came from. When I say I lived on the street, they laugh. She stood and sat beside him, taking his hand. Let them laugh. Every great story starts in a small place. One day, they'll wish they were part of yours. He blinked, his eyes wide. Really? Yes, she said, her voice a promise. And they'll read about you in books. The next week, Amora hired a public speaking coach for Toby, a gentle woman who came every Saturday, teaching him to project his voice, to stand tall. She also hired a tutor to guide him after school, helping with math and English, his handwriting growing neater with each lesson. But Amora did more. She taught him herself, not just schoolwork but life, how to sit in board meetings, how to speak to adults without fear, how to understand money, how to ask questions boldly. One evening, explaining company shares over tea, he paused, his eyes searching hers. Do you really believe I can do this? She looked at him, her voice steady. I wouldn't waste my time if I didn't. He nodded, a spark of determination in his eyes. Okay, then I'll try. But life wasn't always smooth. Some days, the twins fell sick, their cries filling the house. Some nights, Toby woke from nightmares, his face pale. Other times, the pressure of fitting in made him snap. He once shouted at the nanny and ran to his room, collapsing on the floor, head in his hands. I'm tired, he whispered when Amora found him. What if I fail you? She sat beside him, her voice gentle. Then we start again. What if I disappoint you? He asked, his voice breaking. She turned to him, her eyes soft. You can't. Why not? Because you're not here to be perfect, she said. You're here to be loved. Weeks passed, and Toby grew stronger, his shoulders broader, his voice deeper. The twins started crawling faster, chasing each other across the mansion's polished floors, their giggles echoing like music. The house, once a silent fortress, danced with life, tiny footsteps, soft laughter, the clatter of pots from the kitchen where the cook prepared pepper soup and fufu. One day, as Amora left for a meeting, the twins ran to the door, clutching her legs, their tiny hands warm against her skin. She knelt, kissing their foreheads, their hazel eyes sparkling. Toby rushed forward, handing her a packed lunch, a crooked sandwich wrapped in foil. We made it for you, he said proudly, his smile bright. She held it like gold, her heart full. I'll eat it all, she promised, and his grin widened. Outside the mansion, trouble lingered. The company board was divided, some doubting her judgment, others angry at her rewritten will naming outsiders as beneficiaries. At a meeting, a member spoke out, his voice dripping with condescension. Madam Amora, with all due respect, this new direction is too emotional. She replied calmly, her voice cutting like a blade. I made decisions based on truth, not emotion. The boy is smarter than most of you in this room. She placed a file on the table, its pages crisp. This is a proposal from Toby. He found outdated data on our website. If a 13-year-old can spot your mistakes, maybe you're the emotional ones. The room fell silent, her words a checkmate. At home, Toby practiced piano, his fingers tentative but growing surer under the guidance of a soft-spoken music teacher. Amora watched one night, her heart swelling as he played a simple melody. "You're gifted," she said. He smiled, nervous. "I'm just trying." "No," she said, her voice firm. "You're rising." One night, at 2 a.m., Amora woke with a bad feeling, her heart racing. She rushed to the twins' room and found Chisom burning with fever, her tiny body trembling. The nanny was panicking, her hands shaking as she fanned the child. Amora didn't hesitate, bundling the twins into the car and calling Toby. "Get in. We're going to the hospital." He didn't argue, his face pale but resolute. They reached the hospital in 20 minutes, the sterile halls smelling of antiseptic and fear. The doctor diagnosed a viral infection from a shared toy, placing Chisom on a drip. Toby sat beside her bed, holding her hand, his eyes never leaving her face, refusing food or rest. Hours passed, the clock ticking relentlessly, until the fever broke. The doctor smiled. "She's stable now." Amora breathed out, her shoulders sagging with relief. She looked at Toby, still vigilant. "You've done more for her than most adults would," she said, her voice soft. He looked up, his eyes tired but fierce. "I love her." "I know," she said, her heart swelling. He looked at her, his voice a whisper. "I love you too." She didn't speak but reached out, pulling him into a hug, and for the first time in years, she cried, not from pain, but from healing, the tears a release of years of guarded solitude. The house felt full now, not just with people but with life. Each morning began with tiny footsteps racing across the hallway, the twins now walking, chasing each other and bumping into chairs, their laughter a symphony of joy. Toby grew taller, his shoulders broader, his voice deeper, his eyes free of fear, shining with confidence. Amora stood in the living room one evening, holding a warm cup of tea, its steam curling like a question answered. She watched Toby teach the twins to say please and thank you, arranging plastic plates like a restaurant, his patience infinite. "Chisom, say thank you for the food," he said, his voice gentle. She giggled, her attempt close enough, clapping her hands. He laughed, a sound pure and free. Amora smiled, her heart full, whispering to herself, "I never imagined this life, but I'm glad it found me." A week later, Amora received a call from Barrister Ayatund, her voice urgent yet measured over the line. "Madam, there's been a development," she said, the faint rustle of papers audible in the background. "Emma's team is pushing for an appeal. They've hired a new lawyer, and they're digging into your financial decisions, claiming mismanagement." Amora stood in her office, the Lagos skyline stretching before her like a canvas of ambition, its towers glinting in the evening sun. Her fingers tightened around the phone, but her voice remained steady, a calm forged in the fires of countless battles. "Let them dig," she said, her tone as sharp as the edge of a cutlass. "They'll find nothing but my competence. Prepare our defense." "Already on it, Ma," Ayatund replied, her confidence a mirror to Amora's resolve. Hanging up, Amora turned to the window, her reflection a silhouette against the city's glow. The fight wasn't over, but she was no stranger to war. She had built half the Oronquo empire, negotiated deals in boardrooms from Lagos to London, and faced down skeptics who doubted a woman could lead. Now, she fought not just for herself but for 3 children who had become her heart's anchor. Downstairs, the mansion hummed with life, a stark contrast to its former silence. The twins, now toddling with unsteady steps, chased a colorful ball across the living room, their giggles echoing off the marble floors like a melody of hope. Toby sat cross-legged on the woven rug, a book of African folktales open in his lap, reading aloud in a voice that grew steadier with each passing day. "And so, Anansi tricked the lion by weaving a web of clever words," he said, his eyes bright as Chidimma clapped her hands, her hazel eyes sparkling with delight. Chisom, ever the quieter twin, nestled against his side, her thumb in her mouth, listening intently. Amora paused at the foot of the staircase, her silk kaftan flowing like a river of sapphire, watching the scene unfold. The sight warmed her, a balm to the wounds of betrayal that still lingered. She stepped forward, her heels clicking softly, and Toby looked up, his smile shy but genuine. "You're good at that," she said, nodding toward the book. "They love it." He blushed, his fingers tracing the page. "Mommy used to read to me. I want them to have that too." Amora's heart swelled at the word mommy, a reminder of Adesawa's love, now carried forward by her son. "They will," she said softly, sitting beside them, her presence grounding. "And they'll have more, stories, school, a future." Toby's eyes met hers, a flicker of gratitude shining through. "Because of you," he whispered. She shook her head, her voice gentle but firm. "Because of us." The days that followed were a delicate dance of routine and resistance. Amora balanced her role as CEO with her new life as a guardian, her mornings filled with boardroom strategies and her evenings with bedtime stories and lullabies. She enrolled Toby in an elite private school in Ikoyi, its campus a sprawling oasis of green lawns and modern classrooms, where he walked with a mix of pride and trepidation, his navy blazer slightly oversized but his head held high. The twins attended a nearby daycare, their days filled with finger painting and nursery rhymes, their laughter a constant reminder of why Amora fought. But the outside world was relentless. The media frenzy grew, with headlines painting her as both a saint and a schemer, Amora Oronquo, savior or strategist. Social media buzzed with opinions, some praising her compassion, others accusing her of using the children for power. On X, posts flew, "She's giving those kids a life," "God bless her" clashed with "She's just securing her grip on the empire." Smart move, not love. Amora ignored the noise, her focus unwavering, but the weight of scrutiny pressed against her like a storm cloud. One evening, as she reviewed legal documents in her office, the scent of jasmine tea filling the air, Noi knocked softly, her face hesitant. "Madam, there's someone here to see you." Amora looked up, her pen pausing. "Who?" "A woman named Mama Ngozi. Says she knew Adesawa." Amora's heart skipped, her curiosity piqued. "Send her in." Moments later, a stout woman in a vibrant Ankara headwrap entered, her eyes kind but weary, her hands clutching a woven basket filled with mangoes and yams, a traditional gesture of goodwill. "Good evening, madam," she said, her voice rich with the cadence of Yoruba. "I'm Ngozi, Adesawa's neighbor in Ayaganku. I heard about you and the children." Amora gestured to a chair, her expression guarded but curious. "Please sit. How did you know Adesawa?" Mama Ngozi settled heavily, her basket resting on the floor. "She was my friend for years. A good woman, quiet, always helping others. She taught my children to read when I couldn't pay for school." Amora leaned forward, her voice soft but probing. "And the man who visited her?" Mama Ngozi's eyes darkened, her voice lowering. "He came in a big car, always at night. She never told me his name, but she loved him, even if it hurt her. When she got pregnant with the twins, she was happy but scared. She said he was married, that he had another life." Amora's throat tightened, her fingers clenching the armrest. "Did she ever mention me?" Mama Ngozi shook her head, her eyes sympathetic. "No, but she kept a letter for him. She gave it to me before she died, said to give it to her son one day." She reached into her basket, pulling out a worn envelope, its edges frayed but sealed. Amora took it, her hands trembling, and opened it carefully, as if it might crumble. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. "Dyke, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to know I never wanted to hurt her. I loved you, but I respected your marriage. Toby and the twins are my world. If you're reading this, please make sure they're safe. Tell your wife the truth. She deserves it. Adesawa." Amora's eyes burned, tears threatening to spill, but she held them back, her jaw tight. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady despite the storm within. Mama Ngozi nodded, rising. "Take care of them. Adesawa would be proud." As she left, Amora clutched the letter, its words a bridge between her pain and Adesawa's, two women bound by one man's choices. The letter shifted something in Amora, a quiet resolve to honor Adesawa's memory, not just for the children but for the woman who loved them fiercely despite her own struggles. She began planning the Adesawa Foundation, a non-profit to support forgotten families. single mothers, street children, those left behind by society's rush for wealth. She worked late into the night, drafting proposals by lamplight, her office a sanctuary of purpose. One evening, as she reviewed a funding plan, Toby knocked softly, holding a drawing, a stick-figure family under a bright sun, labeled Mom, Toby, Chisom, Chidimma. "I made this for you," he said, his voice shy. Amora's heart melted, her fingers tracing the childish lines. "It's beautiful," she said, pulling him into a hug. "You're my son too." He smiled, his eyes bright, and for the first time, she saw no fear in them, only trust. The appeal hearing loomed, a shadow over their newfound peace. Chief Emma's team escalated their attack, hiring a high-profile lawyer from Abuja, their strategy ruthless: discredit Amora's leadership, question her mental stability, and challenge the children's legitimacy. The night before the hearing, Amora sat with Toby in the garden, the air scented with hibiscus and the distant hum of Lagos nightlife. The twins slept in their stroller, their faces peaceful under the moonlight. "Are you scared?" Toby asked, his voice small, his hands twisting the hem of his shirt. Amora looked at him, her eyes steady. "Not scared," she said. "Ready." He nodded, his voice soft. "What if they win?" She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm. "They won't. I've fought bigger battles than this." He looked up, his eyes searching hers. "For us." "For us," she confirmed, her voice a vow. He smiled, a flicker of hope breaking through his worry. "You're strong," he said. She laughed softly, a rare sound. "So are you." The courtroom was a battlefield, its high ceilings and dark wood amplifying every word. Amora sat beside Ayatund, her navy suit impeccable, her posture unyielding. Emma's lawyer, a tall man with a booming voice, presented his case, his words sharp as daggers. Madame Amora's actions are impulsive, driven by grief, not reason. She has endangered a multi-billion naira empire by bringing in unverified children, risking the family's legacy. Ayatund stood, her voice clear and cutting. "My lord, the children are not unverified. DNA evidence, submitted and uncontested, proves their paternity. Madame Amora has provided them a home, education, and stability. Acts of responsibility, not recklessness." She held up Adesawa's letter, its words a testament to truth. This letter, written by the children's mother, confirms their father's identity and her wish for their safety. Madame Amora is honoring that wish, not exploiting it. The judge, a stern man with wire-rimmed glasses, listened intently, his pen scratching notes. After hours of arguments, he called for a recess, promising a ruling by morning. Amora left the courtroom, her heart pounding but her face calm, ignoring the reporter's shouts as she slipped into her car. That night, she couldn't sleep, her mind replaying every word, every glance. She walked to the twins' room, their cribs bathed in moonlight, their breathing soft and steady. Toby slept on a cot nearby, his arm flung over his face, a book of folktales open beside him. She sat by his side, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, whispering, "We're almost there." Morning brought the ruling, the courtroom packed with spectators, the air thick with anticipation. The judge's voice was steady, resonant. After reviewing all evidence, including DNA results, witness statements, and Madame Amora's documented care for the children, this court upholds her guardianship. The Oronquo estate remains under her control, and the children are recognized as legitimate heirs. The appeal is dismissed. Amora's breath caught, relief flooding her like a river breaking free. Emma's face darkened, his fists clenched, but he said nothing, his defeat sealed. Outside, reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing, their questions a barrage. Amora paused, her voice clear. "This wasn't about winning," she said. "It was about truth. Those children are my family now, and I will protect them with everything I have." She walked away, her head high, her heart steady, the weight of victory heavy but sweet. Back home, the mansion felt lighter, as if the walls themselves exhaled. Toby ran to her, his eyes wide with hope. "Did we win?" She nodded, pulling him into a hug. "We did." He grinned, his face bright, and ran to tell the twins, who clapped their hands, unaware but joyful. That evening, Amora stood in the garden, the stars above a canopy of dreams. She thought of Adesawa, a woman she'd never meet but whose love had reshaped her life. "Thank you," she whispered to the night, her voice soft, a prayer of gratitude. Months turned into years, and the mansion transformed into a home. Toby, now 16, stood taller, his voice deeper, his eyes bright with ambition. He excelled in school, his essays winning awards, his dreams of becoming a lawyer taking shape. The twins, now 3, were a whirlwind of energy, their hazel eyes sparkling as they chased each other through the garden, their laughter a constant song. Amora launched the Adesawa Foundation, its first event a gala that raised millions for street children and single mothers. Toby spoke at the event, his voice steady, his words powerful. "I was one of those children," he said, the crowd silent. "I begged, I starved, I carried my sisters through the rain. But someone stopped for us. She gave me a home, a name, a future. That's what this foundation is about, giving others that chance." The applause was thunderous, and Amora, watching from the side, wiped a tear, her heart full. One evening, 3 years after that rainy day, Amora drove to the spot where she'd found Toby, the divider now dry under a golden sunset. She stood there, her silk dress catching the breeze, her eyes tracing the road where destiny had intervened. Toby joined her, the twins in their stroller, their laughter soft in the evening air. "Why are we here?" he asked. She smiled, her voice warm. "To remember." He nodded, his eyes distant. "I was so scared that day." "So was I," she admitted, her voice soft. He looked at her, surprised. "You?" She laughed, a sound free and light. "Yes, me. But I'm glad I stopped." He took her hand, his grip firm. "I'm glad you did too." She knelt beside the twins, their hazel eyes meeting hers, a mirror to Dyke's but now her own. "I didn't birth you," she whispered, "but you reborn me." They giggled, reaching for her, and she held them close, her heart whole. Dear Voice of AFRICA listeners, this is the saga of Amora's redemption. A story of betrayal that led to love, of pain that birthed purpose, of a family forged not by blood but by choice. From the rain-soaked streets of Lagos to the starlit gardens of a home reborn, Amora, Toby, Chisom, and Chidimma remind us that family is the heart's greatest legacy. Subscribe, share your thoughts in the comments. Would you have stopped in the rain? What would you fight for? Let's continue this journey together, celebrating the stories that make Africa's heart beat strong.